What is a novel? We may say that it is in the nature of a novel to be a long account of something, more than a short story, a fuller, more comprehensive set of events or character or time or place, and with many diverse incidents and diversions, but to be in some way unified through a central character or family or property or vessel, yet and not altogether too episodic, allegorical, or unrealistic. It can, of course, be fantasy, as with Gulliver's Travels in 1726, but not entirely without plausibility or causality in the human realm of understanding, or entirely without human like emotional references to experience, as, for example, Anne Sewell's Black Beauty in 1877, where a horse tells its life story as though possessing human articulate consciousness. A novel must build a world of some kind, no matter how extraordinary that world or universe may be, as in Frank Herbert's Dune in 1965. Yet it may not be entirely incoherent, as would be, say, continuous momentary flashes without ever achieving any organisation or form. This characteristic, that of novelty, change, a break followed by a regathering of coherence, of rebellion yet with some continuity, a breach with and yet conformity to the tales of old, is one of the novel's enduring characteristics. There is something of an investigation in a true novel, whether that is the boundaries of morality, as in Nabokov's Lolita in 1955, or the real motivations of people in the murky world of Raymond Chandler, or an abhorrent psychology, as in American Psycho in 2000. It may be an investigation into a character or place or time, or even into the use of language itself. A kind of case study with detailed thick description, grainy and granular. The author takes us on a journey to find out how people think, how they speak, how they move, into all they do and why. In the following consideration, I am indebted to Michael Bakhtin in his Discourse on the Novel in 1934, which considered communication to be a heteroglossia of many voices, in interacting multiple discourses, running parallel in different arcs of time and place, that it is the nature of communication to be varied and continuous, in overlapping discourse, and for the novel to have a special quality in its ability to set and rewrite its own rules, and to self-reflectively reinvent its own values and nature over and again. Although I think we may allow that the same may be said to be true of architecture, sculpture, music, and other arts. In other words, there is never a mere statement of simple basic fact or set of facts outside and without reference to other things, which is somehow more real than what may be perceived or said of them, but rather a series of overlapping participatory heritages, our words having origins thousands of years before we came into being, and being determined by the use of the voices of those thousands of years. And we are all another voice in that eternal spiralling chorus of a universe speaking to itself. So that in another sense no utterance is ever original. Everything, all thoughts and all writing is always and of necessity an adaptation of what has gone before, and today's iteration is necessarily of something on its way to becoming something else. We can understand the difficulties in defining the novel as a form, as each generation makes innovations and changes to reinvent what they think the novel is, as the story, language, tone, concerns, warnings, neurosis, and vanishing dreams of its own age. It might be better to conceive of the novel as a gradually developing set of texts via many works and authors, beginning in the early modern period in the decades around 1700, in an environment of increasing printing and reading, greater leisure time for some, and greater trade, where prose fiction became extensive and prolific, and more than a succinct self-contained story towards that of an entire biography purporting to be an imitation of life, a set of make-believe, maybe-true adventures, not a single incident, but a life at sea, or indeed then lost at sea, and a gradual construction of a position or attitude towards the life of human experience and the way of life. So that right from the start are present the themes of encounter with far and distant lands, of secret past to be revealed, of personal troubled witness, of conscience in conflict with the practical, of moral dilemma, of controversy and possible redemption, and the great struggle to return home, to gain or regain regard in the world, of issues of nationality and of race. And all this with the prevalence of women's voices and authors, of how these matters manifest in daily life, in society and at home, in concerns over marriage, the upbringing of children, and what may be bequeathed to the next generation in the relation between ethics and morality, between duty and freedom, and for a voice to find its value in what it is to write the account of itself, and in so doing to explore the bounds of what may be said, thought and felt, in both socially concerned reality and an imaginative fantasy, satire and surrealism. While one person's perspective will inevitably be somewhat subjective, as it is in other matters of taste and judgment, nevertheless, this overview is based on extensive reading in a comparative and critical encounter with the material, in acknowledgement of views established over the last few hundred years, and seen through a developed and trained critical reading of the works. This lecture may serve as a general introduction, but as with all views of works of art or social phenomena, and however well informed, it will remain inevitably one critical reader's opinion. But at the very least, we may say it is my view of the works of this time and not someone else's. Others are, of course, welcome, even invited, to disagree. And it is an essential feature of critical appraisal that the works and the reactions to them stimulate and encourage a discussion of values, of attitudes then and now, of the issues of place, views of gender, race, wealth, power, the other nations of the world, of artistic expression, of realism in encounter with idealism, of sheer description of the world versus intervention in it, of the nature of the human, and the individual self as its origin, growth and development, and the diversity of the world and the many forms of human discourse and communication between the facts and opinions in the use of our critical judgment, our evaluations, and the nature of our use of language. A word on communication, identity, and the nature of reading. I consider reading to be an understanding in relation to the experience and understanding of others who are necessarily different from ourselves, and for this to be reading's joy. When I read Charlotte Bronte, I am not becoming a 19th century woman, expressing my identity through conflict with others, as though a novel were an election to a Senate to validate my role in the economy. That is not what is really happening. We are not seeking candidates just like us to be elected to become the next real Shakespeare. That is to impose an incorrect model, a political model, or kind of politics, an incorrect evaluation on a very different kind of consideration of human worth. It's a reduction of diversity, an infinite difference in detail, where the novel and life's actual vision lie, to make it merely a matter of identification and, as it were, approval and election as a rule or model for all other people seems to be extremely intolerant. Predetermined and subtle or inflexible and even unaware identity politics is used as a power struggle to distract from genuine encounter with others. A struggle that inevitably seeks allies and enemies, winners and losers, and that is an entirely different activity from relatability, or the genuine encounter of the I, thou of Martin Buber, to understand someone who is different from ourselves, to appreciate and even celebrate that difference. That's where real cultural maturity thrives. In relating to others, we are relating to the experience of another, different from ourselves, and in so doing to all humanity. It is a communicative act, not a transaction with a winner and a loser, or solely informative, or consisting of nothing other than information, or lacking in thoughts and feelings and critical judgment or development over time, or the dynamics of human change. Quite the opposite. I do not read something because the book expresses my identity. Far from it. And no one should encourage a school or its teachers to limit themselves to a simple all-or-nothing identification with faces on book covers. The encounter with the other and the ability to hear the views of others and not expect or demand agreement is the hallmark of a civilized society. In reading, we seek understanding. A developed, informed, multivalent understanding that is not reducible to one metric of biography, as though we were all mere commodities expressing one single choice or flavour for an instant to brand us for the rest of our lives. Rather than the discerning, subtle, mysterious, and ineffable beings we actually are. Insofar as the consideration of speech is merely that of rebuttal, of power, and of defining a winner and a loser, or, which is even worse, that of a component in a totalizing compliance, catch-out, blame culture, then as a communicative act it would have entirely failed. The selection of books to read in school should not be based on a restriction to a perceived exclusive tribe of identity, race, and gender determined by the character, let alone the skin tone, portrayed on the book cover. Nor is reading the same as the momentary impulse of selection and acquisition of a superficial shopping preference, but an altogether more respectful congregation with others. In the many diverse communities of people there are, like and unlike ourselves, over the centuries, the living and the dead, and it is with patience and tolerance and an open ear and mind that we begin to read.